is Behind the Games from newoverlords.com, where we seek creators of all kinds to find out what's behind our favorite games. With your hosts, Jeff and Seema.
This is New Overlords Behind the Games podcast, and from our Midwest studio, I'm Jeff Ilimek.
And from our Northeast studio, I'm Seema.
Today we are joined by Shae Rossi, who's a writer and content designer at Standing Stone Games working on Lord of the Rings Online. Shae, hello.
Hi, thank you for having me again.
Thank you for being here. Seema and I have been fans of Tolkien since way back.
Yes.
Practically back to Tolkien's time.
Yes.
and sooner than that, more recent than that, fans of Lord of the Rings Online for a long time. And to prove it, I've got my stack of one edition of my books here, and I won't make you guess what's in my pocket, but I do have the One Ring. Here, I don't know if I can hold it up close enough to the camera for the people that are seeing it on video to see what it looks like. But I was not a child when I got this. I was a grown-up person, and I think I bought it for myself around the time that the movies were coming out. But it's got the etching into it and everything. I've always been a fan. Separately, certainly a fan of Lord of the Rings Online, which I think is still, for me, of all the MMOs that we in our gaming community that we play with, is sort of like in a special spot in my mind. It's been out for a while. It's a little bit older. The graphics are a little bit older, but it's not about that. And what people love it for is a few things, I think. One in particular is it's Tolkien, it's Lord of the Rings, and you're in the story. And as you play along, you're not part of the fellowship. It's not like you play the same thing that you've already seen, but you're in and about and around. And from the very first moment, you're mixed with the fellowship, and then you diverge paths and you cross paths constantly. Gandalf shows up, Strider shows up early on as you're going through the intro sequence. And the parts I think that really make it interesting for role players and people that love this game right now is being able to experience the lore, which I think is why it's perfect to talk to you about this, because I think there's a challenge there to write around such a strong bit of lore, such a strong story. So now we're going to talk a lot about that, and I'm really excited to get into that. But before we do, why don't we have you sort of introduce your origin story and how you got to writing for Standing Stone and for Lord of the Rings Online?
Sure. So, I guess I could start with how I got into games. I had been working for a company making audio language learning courses. I've always, like Tolkien, been fascinated with language and how people communicate with each other. I graduated from Smith College with a degree in folklore. So I'm really interested in the stories that people tell and how we communicate with one another. But that job, as much as I loved it and really enjoyed doing what I was doing, there was no room for advancement there. So I started sort of looking outside of that and trying to figure out like what I could do otherwise with a folklore degree, an English degree, and just a real passion for fantasy and magic and dragons. And then sort of was trying to figure out like how can I make my life just all about magic and all about writing. And I just started taking online classes and pretty much self-taught everything for many years, and just started making games like that. Everybody says, like, how do you get into the industry? And the answer is to make games. You have to make games. So make games in order to make games with other people, and then other people, and it kind of snowballs from there. I took a bunch of classes. And
when you say you started taking classes, were they specifically classes about how to make games, or were they about something beside that? Or
so the first like games related class I took was like Introduction to Games. It was like Games 101, and we learned like how to use Scratch and all sorts of like very easy tools that help you make games without needing to program. So you don't need to like learn a language
Right.
You could like make something, make some sort of media, some sort of content, and then also just have an understanding of games. And this was through Coursera, I believe. Hold on, let me look up my own LinkedIn profile. Like I have all this information somewhere. Yeah, so this was edX. It was a introduction to game design, and then through Coursera, taking online games, literature, new media, and narrative. And in that class, we played The Lord of the Rings online for a little bit.
Really?
We played all the way up to Weathertop, and looked at how games transferred from different media and how other medias. It was a transmedia kind of class, so how the book relates to the game and how the game relates to the books and things like that, and it's really fascinating. So through that, I was introduced to Corey Olson and his. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Tolkien Professor podcast, but I'm a huge fan, and I just kind of went diehard, like super dove into his stuff. And at that point, I had still never read The Lord of the Rings. I'd seen the movies, and I'd read The Hobbit, and I'd read The Silmarillion. Back to back.
Okay.
Okay. Wow.
But I never read The Lord of the Rings. I started it and I found it boring. So I think I just
But not the
needed to, like,
Silmarillion. You didn't find that boring.
The Silmarillion I loved. I was like, that's my favorite book of the series. There were so many like stories in it. And I guess like I didn't know that it was supposed to be difficult, so I just like sat down and read it like front to back. I probably didn't retain very much because every time I reread it or listen to it again, like I'm like, oh God, how did I miss this entire story? Like I'm still not really sure on the children of Hurin and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I have this is my mother's copy of the Silmarillion from the 1970s.
Nice.
Yeah, old copy with some very little underlining or anything that she did in it. So I'd be very careful of it. But
as you're saying this, I'm thinking to get into games, you need to get into games and you need to learn about games and then start doing some things. And I completely agree with that. But one of the things you said is even your folklore degree, I think was probably a key asset, a key strength. When I think about like telling stories, especially in video games, so much of any new video game that comes out or the settings of a lot of video games, a lot of it draws heavily from various types of folklore. And if you can have a big library of knowledge of folklore to draw on, I think that's really powerful for any game designer or any game company that wants to come up with a game. I mean, there's new games that are coming out right now, like Valheim. Valheim's a fun, survival building game, but it's Norse mythology, and it's so it's like these stories that create a setting that is both new and interesting, but also familiar to people. It's sort of like part of our cultural knowledge. Yeah. So I would love that. I think that would be a really powerful strength to a design team or a narrative team to have someone that has sort of that folklore knowledge.
Well, I think what helped too is, so when I originally went to college, my intention was to do East Asian folklore, like to study Japanese and Chinese and focus on that. And then I took one class on Beowulf and I just fell off the track completely. And so it was like, but I want to do Chinese and Norse. And being a Gemini, I was just like, how porque no los dos? So I'm like, I'll just keep doing both. Yeah. So like, I just sort of went much like Tolkien himself, like dove head first into the North stuff, and it's just like really started like reading through the Eddas and like taking classes based around that. And actually, because of that, I feel like my whole life has sort of fallen into place, like because of this like niche thing that became a passion of mine. Because I had an internship working with my Beowulf professor on the Old English newsletter, like what they were doing for the summer. We were writing synopses on the various publications that came out for this publication. And so when I went to apply for a job at the language learning company, my boss was like, "Oh, you studied Beowulf?" And she got up and she shut the door and then recited the first 10 lines in Old English and was like, "I was an Old English major." And so you never know where your passions are going to take you. And I fully think that everybody can find a niche in their life for the things that they're really passionate about. Like there is a place to carve out a profession if you want, based around those things that you're passionate about, maybe you and your hobbies.
That's amazing. I think the folklore and the stories that lends itself very well to narrative, but then the other side that you said you're interested in is just like language, and that's a very Tolkien thing. Tolkien was very into languages. Seema, you studied language.
Yes, and I
quite a
was just
bit.
going to say what you just said is like a recurring theme we've heard many times is like do and show up and stay open. Stay open. And what I'm hearing from you is stay open to your passions and don't try to work necessarily to a schedule or what other people say is what you should do, because then you end up in a corner, maybe, doing something that's not your favorite.
And bring your whole self to the table. I've heard people talk about that, which is sometimes hard to do.
Yeah.
And
it's a special skill. Yeah.
Yeah. That's sort of like the diverse talents that good companies, good teams desire, they really want these days.
Yeah. I think one piece of advice that I've heard multiple times just over the years have been like, get out of the house and go do things, have life experiences, because those are things that you can take into game design. Like as in my first game design job was working on a sci-fi game, and it was completely text based. So I had to describe the fight scenes. And so my martial arts training ended up coming in extremely useful, and all the kung fu movies that I spent hours and hours watching, and all the anime that I watched. And there I am, like using this like weird like knowledge from a weird place and putting it into my professional life. So like all of those, I could never have imagined that in this little thing that I would pick up, I would suddenly put it into a game. And it would be some like little tiny nugget of life experience that translated into a player experience.
Do you ever find yourself, I was just thinking about this the other day, do you ever find yourself when you're writing something or you're designing something, and just even like the language and vocabulary you use, that you have to back it off because what's something that may be really familiar and just common knowledge to you that you maybe can't bring or call it. So in my head, I was thinking about it. Well, what if this game, what if they did something, they, instead of, how we have hats, you could get out different hats in games. Then it's like a cash shop thing. We're going to get hats. Well, what if somebody did it with gloves, right? We'll call them like the gauntlets, it's cosmetic gauntlets. So you could get different. Now I'm saying gauntlet over and over and over again in my head. And then I thought, maybe we can't call it gauntlets, because if we tell, just a general person off the street, and I've had this happen multiple times in my life, they're like, what are you saying? What's that word you're saying?
Yeah, right.
What, you don't know what greaves are?
Right. Yeah. I actually did run into that a lot with armor. Because I have, played D&D like a lot. And so I feel like when you play D&D, you get a pretty good working knowledge of armor, like pauldrons, like weird things
exactly.
like that. Yeah. For LOTRO, I don't find that I have as much of a problem with that, because the player, I haven't had any feedback personally yet for this kind of thing, but I think that our player base is really well read, but they've also, a lot of them have sat through 15 years of of this writing style. So like they're up on it. They're probably better at it than I am.
And sometimes with that kind of setting, I often seek out that kind of setting to learn these new terms. So I don't want it to be backed off. I want if you're going to forge something, lay it on me, lay all the new vocabulary on me, because now I've got that to add to my repertoire.
Yeah, I think that people who are avid readers, or who were avid readers when they were younger, just devouring as many books as they can, tend to have a larger vocabulary than some other people, because they have had exposure to those types of things and those words. And so, I always try to recommend people to like read outside your genre, like read outside. If you just love fantasy, also check out other things, because sometimes as a community, we can sort of fall into ruts and like kind of go the same direction sometimes. So like I found that I really loved fantasy as a child, and I like the specific kind of fantasy. So it was all like very rote. And then when I started reading outside of that, genre, I became more creative myself because I was being exposed to different things that I would never
Yeah.
even have thought of.
Right. It's like exercising a different muscle.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
I kind of think of it as going off and just collecting experiences almost as tools and putting them in your toolkit.
Yes.
And
Yes, that's perfect.
I recommend this to people in their professional lives as well. I've always been in had a consulting background, and seeking projects that are interesting in like a new industry, and then now you've collected that knowledge about a new industry, about healthcare, about manufacturing, about in this case about Eastern folklore and fantasy, and and dragons, or in sci-fi and mystery and like murder mysteries. There's a whole way that those get written and those stories get told. Noir that you could like start mixing those things together and create something innovative and new as a result.
Yeah, I'm watching Pennyworth right now, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's Alfred Pennyworth, who's Batman's butler, and it's all about him when he was in his like 20s and 30s. And a couple of the episodes recently have been like going toward this like noir detective kind of like atmosphere, and you can tell, I don't know if it's the director trying something new or a new director, but it's like a different flavor all of a sudden, and like you can just like see that element of like, for this episode we're gonna go toward this direction, and just catching those subtle flavors that just give something so much more texture and interesting. I don't want to say visuals, but like it's like a completely different experience than like a previous episode to help set the tone or help move the story forward.
Yeah, I like that in various media where they'll even shift within a series, or when series or games are designed around mixing media. You got something like Firefly, which was sci-fi but Western. You start doing those kinds of things. Let's get a little bit deeper into LOTRO specifically and the kinds of things that you've written, because I know a couple of them, but the people who are listening don't know it just yet. So name a couple of things that you're multiple things. You're a writer, but also a content designer, and I think it'd be fun to sort of like explain that in the context of some things you've done in the game.
Sure. So as a content designer, I'm responsible for writing quests and content, obviously. So that can mean anything from dialogue between characters in an instance where like it's a sort of like a cutscene that can be interactable, or you're just watching part of it, or like quests like, there's 7 cows over there and I only want there to be 5 cows. Please do away with 2 of those cows. There are too many cows. Drive those 2 cows away. Any kind of writing that goes into those, and it's like, so-and-so told you to do away with 2 cows. So, it's just like a lot of little things, but also then you get to do more character-based stuff too, and tell a story throughout multiple quests or within a quest. So I handle all of the writing for that, but I also we create the NPCs, so that's all handled via spreadsheets, but also that's how you like create the 3D objects that then get put into the game. So we have like base entities, and then we like kind of design what they're going to do and what actions they can do, whether they're interactable with a quest. That's all handled on a spreadsheet. It's very exciting. And then once you like create those, the next part of my job is the level design part. So I get to go into our game engine and create the space. I don't create, like, I'm not doing the world design stuff, but I'm creating within the spaces that are designed. So like a town might be set up, and I'll put the NPC down in the town where it needs to be. And all of the quest items, I'll place those, and the monsters that I need, unless it's just like, killed 10 goblins at this place and there's already goblins there. So anytime you're interacting with a quest that has an item, an NPC, or monster, that's one of the quest designers is responsible for most of that stuff.
This was interesting to me and gets back to some conversations we've had with like systems engineers inside of game design versus like level designers and game designers, and where there's the game engine, and then there's the layer on top of the game engine, which is the game assets. And the game systems designers are often designing the game asset, which also often has multiple pieces. Mm-hmm. One is the piece that the player the part that the player sees, And one is the part of that's the interface that the designer sees.
Mm-hmm.
And then that toolbox of those assets are given to a designer. So I'm fascinated by this idea of the round trip, which is there's writing that goes on. And this is what my idea of this all before I started learning and starting to talk to you and people like you in games was writers write, and then they hand it over to the coders, and then the coders code that up,
right,
and then
right.
you have a game.
Right. Code that up.
Yep.
Where that part of that is right. There is some writing that happens beforehand. There's writing, and there's the creative, and there's key art, and that kind of thing. And then, like the game world might get created, and then the game assets might get created, and then this whole loop starts to go back again.
Mm-hmm.
So then it goes to you, and you, as I think when in one of our early conversations, you mentioned, then you go into an early version of the world, and you get to like look around and check it out, and then from there decide, well, exactly how is this going to play out, and what story am I going to tell for this little side quest inside of this now rendered environment?
Yeah.
So is that how that works? And
yeah, so it's different on every game, but for LOTRO in particular, all the systems are mostly in place for the stuff that I have to deal with, because it is a 15-year-old game. So that's set for the most part. Like when you punch something, it does damage, and like they've created the tools for us to use to not have to, big truck, not have to handle, creating that from the ground up every time, thankfully. But World is usually a couple months ahead of us. So they are, we all sit down as a team and decide, like, okay, this is what we're going to do next. So when we were, like, a while back, we decided we were going to do Gundabad. And Gundabad is the mountain where the dwarves fight. Are fighting to get their home back. And so while we were off, I was doing Wildwood and Elderslade, and they were already working on building Gundabad. So they were creating the terrain and putting in waterfalls and things like that. But we would work together with them to say, okay, in this zone, we want these type of monsters. It makes sense in this biosphere to have this kind of a water-related monster or a field-related monster. There shouldn't be goblins here because there's no way that goblins could get into this area, for example. Okay. So then we would decide on the camps, and then we would decide on the friendly points of interest as well. So like, we're going to have a town here. There's going to be a village here. Like there may be some small bit of two rangers set up with a tent over here. And then we try to figure out the flow through the zones. So like, we don't want to have to make players like have a central point and like go over there, come back, go over there, come back, go there. Like players like that. So like going through a zone and flowing through it, and like having like a travel path, even if you do go out all over the place, like it having some sort of flow to it. And then they go off and they build, and we start writing. But there's like this like lag time of their building and we are doing other things to set up the zones and things like that. Then we come along behind them and we get to play in the spaces, which is for me one of the most fun parts because I get so much inspiration from seeing space. I can't wait for players to see the new spaces that we have coming for them. I wish I could say more about it, but I just when we start the updates, we have a small meeting where the world will show off the area just to like our team and to everybody so that we know what we're working with. And I wasn't going to be working in one of these zones. And as I'm seeing them just like showing these like stories are like coming in and hitting me, and I'm like, I wish I could be writing in this zone. It's just so inspiring seeing everything. So I'm just like a very visual creator. So I work really well like visually from other spaces, but sometimes you're just telling a story that's like, go talk. I'm not talking to that person. Help me out with that. Like it has nothing to do with like the physical location that they're in.
That really sounds interesting. The opportunity to get in there, experience the world, wander around a bit, and then sort of like create the stories from within it.
Yeah,
that is something that is probably unique to game storytelling. It's not like if you're writing a novel or creating a movie,
Right. They certainly don't make a set and then the writers then figure out what to do.
They don't the Mandalorian team didn't like wander around on Tatooine.
On Tatooine.
They had a script. I mean, there's like the script writers write the script, but there's some round trips there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that they do have they have storyboarding, right? So and I would imagine that as a writer on Star Wars, if I was going to be doing a story based on Tatooine, I would put like a Pinterest board together that had like everybody's ideas of what Tatooine looks like, and then like take inspiration from those. So I guess to me, creation is always a collaborative process where I'm like kind of working with other people, especially artists, because I'm not an artist myself. Just having that visual component, and that's so valuable in games. Like, it's totally different. What separates it from, books and things like that.
Well, since you mentioned Star Wars, when you first came to the world of Lord of the Rings, was it intimidating to think about writing something in that world that's so well loved and so well understood and so well known?
Yeah, I was very concerned about my Tolkien voice. Like, I really wanted to be sure that I was writing Tolkienian correctly. That, like, it sounded like, it wasn't like, hither down we go to the water yondereth.
Yes.
So like I had a lot of hangups about that, but I feel like I've kind of started to find my voice. Sometimes people will like come back at me with things that are like, they went a little bit too like, thou mustn't in this direction.
Like Jeff always says, hail and well met.
And whatnot.
Yep.
Hail and thou mustn't eat the lamb's bread. They don't. Yeah. Sometimes they just say, "Eat the bread."
Yeah. Hi, buddy. So it was challenging. On the one hand, but on the other hand, so much of fantasy is derived from Tolkien that I've just been seeped in this from like my entire life.
Yeah.
So like by default, I can't be. I don't think I can be totally awful at it. As writing within the IP, I think the hardest thing for me has this been done before? Because I haven't played through all of the content. There's 15 years of Lord of the Rings online content.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've not played through every single quest and things like that. Luckily for me, our wiki is incredibly up to date, and that's all player created and curated. So they do an amazing job of putting like all of the quests in there, and it's like really easy to just go and search for something. When I was applying for the job, it was the first thing I did was like run to the wiki to see like, is this idea in line with what this game is?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there's many things about the community of LOTRO too that make it kind of unique. I mean, there's avid players in lots of different communities, but the LOTRO community is something special.
Absolutely, and I feel like they take kinship to a next level as well. They're so involved in community, like community days, and they have their own festivals and their own events.
Yeah.
A lot of them based around music. We were talking about before that you say that have you played music yourself, Jeff, in the game?
Yes.
Yeah.
Both.
Yes.
Both, yeah. So one of the things that our gaming community has done is we've got a kinship. There's people in there. They play all the time. They play all the regular playing, but there's a subset of us that only get in there on special occasion, kind of our own special occasions. We have our own sort of even annual events, and we have what we call the band. We get the band together. It's almost like a Blues Brothers. The band. And for people that aren't familiar, there's a system in Lord of the Rings Online where you can encode almost MIDI files that have parts of music that get played by your character on an instrument. And you can have multiple parts on multiple instruments that all within a little in-game system can all get synced up together. So your band is playing a multiple part song in the game and performing this for other people live as you play. So we did this multiple times. And there, as you said, community-wise and role-playing-wise, there are kinships. There are groups of people that do this all the time, and
Yeah.
they have weekly sessions, and people come and watch and dance, and while they perform very elaborate pieces of music that they
Mhm.
custom code up themselves.
Mhm.
Uh, we were on one of these was going on, and we went to one of the side stages in Bree outside the Prancing Pony, and we were just had our little 4 or 5 people. We were playing like pop songs and rock and classic rock, and we were playing all this stuff, and we kind of got scouted in game, in game slash out of game, but in character. But this was because they wanted to potentially invite us to the community to play. We got scouted, and somebody came up. I was like asking, "Oh yeah, you guys are playing, apparently
here's my
good. We're
card."
doing a festival next week. Would you like to come play at our fest?" Yeah, exactly. So
Great.
that was such a meta experience to
That's
be in
awesome.
the game, playing in our band, get scouted and invited to again,
Oh
this
my
is all
goodness.
player created
Yeah.
stuff, which was fascinating.
And you're like, I made it. I've made it.
Right. I know. We got scouted by I think it's the Lonely Mountain Band or whatever,
that's great.
one of the big
I-
ones.
And
on our server.
another amazing thing about this game is yes, the player created content, but there's still so much content
Mm.
that's created by the developers of the game, and like there's festivals going on almost all the time,
Yeah.
and then there's zone after zone after zone after zone. It's really kind of incredible, and the music and the ambient sound is fantastic.
Yeah. We have a composer. It's Bill Champagne, who now is mostly responsible for the music, and he'll be like, "Here's a track that I put together for this area," and you're like, "This is beautiful, and I want to go adventuring, but also like I should stay home and eat pie," and like, "Oh, this is like
Yes.
so moving, and I feel so inspired right now," and like, I don't have anything to do with this energy. I guess I'll write more.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really like amazing. Like I can't believe he comes up with so many unique tracks, and just wandering through the game is just I sometimes I forget because I used to not play with the music on. Pardon. When I played World of Warcraft, because I would have my radio on. So like
Right.
Yeah.
I would when I
Right.
played this game, and it's like you wander into different areas, and you're like, so spooky all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Or like
Right.
it's so cheerful.
Yeah, when
in
the spooky music starts up, then
Yeah.
you know something's up.
Yep.
But I was the same. I used to play with music off most of the time. And especially after talking to creators, I always play, at least to start, at least for a while, with all of the music on.
Yeah.
And have been appreciating it so much more because of hearing people talk about it and hearing the process of how much that goes into or helps create the environment.
Yeah, good music can really set the tone. Have you played Journey?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the music in that game is like rips your heart out. It's so like the cello.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's amazing. Similar to the Lord of the Rings movies, I feel like the music in the Lord of the Rings Online is so thematically appropriate a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Because it's just like really like this song feels dwarfish.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, which is how you know that the composers are doing a great job.
Yeah.
Speaking of the community and the events kind of thing going on, I know you've written some of the parts of some of the events, like the wedding event, which was a highlight, and I've done all the way through multiple times. And we have a couple people in our community that got wind of us talking to you, and we're sort of asking about that from two directions, like writing for that kind of thing. The wedding event is between Arwen and Aragorn, and all of the fellowship is there. Gandalf is there, and there's little side quests going on the whole time. And each of the characters that you're maybe doing a side quest for, Merry and Pippin are pulling pranks, and so you're like going along with them and pulling pranks with them, and it's very Merry and Pippin-ish. And Gandalf, there's like some political intrigue in the greater world that you hope isn't going to impact the kingdom, and he's having you go track down some rumors around that. So the questions relate to how difficult is it to write within the lore within Lord of the Rings with the here we've got Aragorn, who we know, and Gandalf, who we know, and Merry and Pippin, who we know, and then you've got to write with stories or side things within out inside of that, but something new still gets created.
Mm.
How does that happen?
So that was my first. That was the first thing that I worked on the game. Um, that was awesome to come into that because it was such a celebratory experience.
Yeah.
So I think just how I personally approach that is I go back and I read the source material, like what was happening at this time, and I read it over and over, and I try to like get an idea of like what the feeling of it is, and then you try to figure out, well, who is where, like where is everybody, where are they coming from, what are they doing, what was happening with them at this moment, who are they as people. I didn't write any of the quests for like the main characters. I probably could have, but like I was too shy to like start then. But I just recently did write for um somebody, and this is how I approached it. Basically, just kind of immerse yourself in all of the scenes that you can from the original source material, that, and then go back and look and see what those characters have been up to till this point in the game itself as well. So trying to have an understanding of like what brought them to where they are. What's their motivation?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and then
so related to that, with that in particular, someone else asked, do you have like tools or reference material, or is it all just going back to the books and movies, or do you have like internal documents written up for, hey, if you're gonna do anything with with Pippin, he's always, you always got to do this, or I don't know.
We absolutely have certain guidelines that we need to stay within, as far as like being truthful to the IP. So it always should feel Tolkienian, if that makes any sense. Like we wouldn't want to all of a sudden have like Arwen become a serial killer, like or like
Right.
open a doggy daycare or something, like she might do that, but like something that would be completely out of character for her, or that would be outside of the vision of what, and like we don't have like this is Tolkien's vision, like you have to, like there's no like black book of documentation of like this is it, but we trust that we have an understanding that we try to stick within like those guidelines,
Yeah.
But also expand past those things to stay within the feeling and the flavor of what he created, but to expand upon it and to create
Yeah.
more of the same sort of thing. I mean, like obviously, I'm never going to create a masterpiece in the same manner as him, but getting a chance to like, it's like he created it's like he's washing the dishes and it's very soapy, and like we are making more soap bubbles like coming
Mhm.
out. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a great
Just, like
analogy.
expanding upon like what he did. And he himself wrote, and I wish I could find this exact quote, but he always said that he didn't want anybody to come in and write exactly what he wrote. Like he wanted people to be able to expand upon his universe and his world, and to like tell stories within it. So what I'm trying to do is tell stories along the vein that are so what I'm looking for. They honor his vision and what he
Yeah.
created. But maybe even to like introduce new things, and like maybe he didn't get a chance to talk a lot about gay marriage between like dwarves or something like that. Like that's something that excuse me, that maybe we can bring into the game, not that specifically, but
Right. Yeah. I mean, just expand the world, and there is
yeah.
more of the world, and there's so much of the
Mhm.
world that he never got to writing.
Yes,
It's
yeah,
Right.
probably really exciting, an opportunity
And
to
then
get
absolutely.
into
sometimes,
bring those
too, there's
those
things
things
that
to
you
life.
have to refer to that are things that happen in the book, but there's no dialogue about it.
Right.
So you end up like in that wedding scene, the speech, the beautiful speech that Gandalf gives. It's all about stuff that did happen in the book,
Mhm.
but I don't think that speech is in the book, right?
No, not at
Right.
all. That was completely written by someone on our team, not myself. I did give some ideas. I believe he went on a little bit about like trees and things like that, and I had like kind of presented. I was like, hey, what about this poem that Tolkien wrote about, being trees? So like taking something like that he wrote that's not part of what we can like really we don't have the rights to or whatever, and remastering it, reforming it, kind of like taking the essence of it and bringing it into the game without like copying it or whatever.
Right.
Oh, that's great.
So like I definitely we all definitely reference a lot of his other works, but we don't have the rights to those, so that we're not like taking that information like wholesale. Like we can't say this character is part of the story now, but we can, take the ideas, not the ideas, but like the essence of it and try to expand on that.
Now, another aspect of bringing it all to life that I think you were even doing today was when you get to even beyond rendering it in the game environment, voice acting, bringing the things that you've written to life with voice actors. How has that been? I think you were even doing some of that earlier today. What was that like?
It's one of my favorite parts of the job. Having the opportunity to sit in the studio, we do it all through Skype. They're in their own studio and we're like listening, and there's a gentleman that runs it as the director, and we work specifically with Screen Actor Guild actors and things like that. So like they're absolutely incredible. So to have an idea in your head and you're like, this line is going to be like, well done, but then like this person comes in with their voice and like this full on beautiful cultured like well done or something like that. You're just like, oh my god, that was amazing. It's just it's so exciting because it just brings it to life. This thing you've been working on for months or more, all of a sudden you're one step closer to the realization of it and to what the player is going to experience, and you just get like these, I don't know, for me I get like chills. I'm so excited. I'm like, I can't wait for the player to hear this. It's gonna sound so funny, or it's gonna sound so scary or so cool.
It's sort of like how we as game players, there's like always moments in the game that give you that sort of rush or that, like Jeff says, that hit of dopamine. And like working on the game is almost structured similarly. Like you get to certain points and you get that reward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
There's there's a meta game of working on the game, and if you can make work your game, well, then you've kind of won at life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And like the music, the voice actors are another element, another layer of bringing that immersion for the player into Tolkien's world. So like that sounds like a dwarf, that sounds like an elf, that's definitely what Gandalf sounds like, like
very dangerous over short distances.
And it's just having that one step closer to that, like the game being a reality, it being the reality that you're a part of, that you're immersed in.
And I've been thinking about that the immersion aspect of games too, because in a way it's because I'm almost thinking with LOTRO, since it is older graphics, in a way that's kind of more immersive because more of your mental image of the world and the characters and the part of it that you bring to the game is more real than when you're watching a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because that's so clearly someone else's vision for that character.
Yeah. Well, and plus, like, you are bringing yourself to the experience. So, like, you are walking over to that cliff. You are going to stand on that rock. You are attacking the monster.
Right. And maybe you didn't walk over that cliff. You walked over to this other cliff, and that was the wrong cliff. And now you have to go back.
And even though the graphics are, like, older for LOTRO, what the world building team manages to create is absolutely gorgeous. And I see some of these screenshots that the players take, like they post them, like I see them come across Reddit and things. Absolutely stunning, like just the way that they catch a sunrise or a sunset or like a long distance. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's absolutely gorgeous.
Last thing on the voice acting, we've done. We've worked alongside BioWare for a while. They've got a lot of voice actors. They've done some interviews with the voice actors, and I've seen some elsewhere. These are amazing people, aren't they? They're all like, beautiful sounding, beautiful people, are the nicest people in the world. It's got to be fun to work with them.
It's incredible, and they're all hilarious too. Like they're all super funny, really pumped about what they're doing, and they don't come to you with just with the voice that you're acting. Like they get silly sometimes, and they'll like read the voice like Anakin Skywalker or something like that. Like all of a sudden they're Darth Vader, and you're just like, and like they are so multifaceted and so talented, and it's just like blows me away. We had one session, forget who the voice actor was, but like all of us afterwards, we were just like we just felt like we had gone to a play, and it was just when you're really in the groove, like she was hitting every single line. She didn't need a lot of direction. She was just like, taking stuff to a place that we could never have imagined. And that was my first time like working with her, and I was just like, this is amazing. Like, how am I this lucky? How do we get to be this lucky to work with so much talent? And I love it. It's so exciting.
But it's just it's another member of the team, and they bring their strength and their skill to the table.
I got some compliments.
Sometimes
today
I think
so that's cool.
the voice actors don't realize how much we love them.
Oh,
I saw some voice actors come on the stage at a BlizzCon once, and they were just blown away by the reaction of the audience, because they think they're doing, it's a game, it's a blah, 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 blah. And then they don't realize they're tapping into this huge sort of, I don't know, forest of love and affection.
I saw that with Overwatch, the actor that plays Reinhardt, just like, he went all in, like he was Reinhardt. It was so much fun watching him have fun with that.
I got to meet him in New York at a meetup for Star Wars: The Old Republic. Had a couple beers with him, and 200 other people. But nicest guy, loves what he does. I've seen interviews where he just loves the community, and again, voice actors, great people. All right. So as we sort of look to the future of games, or the future of what you're doing, either with LOTRO or with other things you're writing, what is the future? What ideas do you have for the future? The future of the game industry, or the future of you?
The future of you, or
future of me. So I'm really interested in diversity and bringing more diverse stories into games, either getting out of the way for other people to tell those stories or to assist in those stories. It's been exciting being able to sort of do that within LOTRO as well. And we have some exciting things coming down the pipeline as for that I can't talk about. I would love for the pandemic to go away so that the game industry events could open back up again, because I absolutely love meeting with people in person and mentoring others into the industry or within the industry, and just helping people find their footing or helping them to connect. I used to help run Women in Games Boston, and we would have monthly meetings, and that was absolutely incredible, because I would have like somebody come in and teach, or we would have a workshop on something, or that we would just showcase games from various or games or projects that local indies were doing and such. And I miss that. I miss having the ability to do that. So I'm really hoping that is something that can happen again in the very soon future. That would be amazing.
And that gets to another, and we've had multiple people from the Boston area on this show, and that I've talked to, and I went to PAX East, and obviously that was a big piece of it as well. But Boston just seems like such a great environment for the game developer community, from AAA to indie, and for the kinds of groups and meetups and diverse groups and women in games to get together. I think that comes back to a big recommendation for anybody that's thinking about games or just interested in general, or you've just as a hobby. Maybe you're not going to do it professionally, but it's just amazing supportive communities. It's a great
Yes.
opportunity to get involved in, Boston Indies or IGDA or the Unity, developers group or the
Yep.
Unreal developers group, but never the twain shall meet of those two, of course. But
We're all friends.
So,
We cross
right.
the streams. It's like, oh. Yeah.
So
There's so
excellent.
many local groups, and there used to be so many events happening. Like, it was almost at a point where you could go to like a meetup every week during the month. Like, you'd go to one or two, and on the weekends there would be like Unity trainings up at the Microsoft Center, and it was incredible. I feel so lucky to have had that opportunity before the pandemic hit to really connect with the local community, because like that's how I got my job, is because other people had met me and knew that I wasn't a jerk as far as they knew.
Yeah.
And without that ability to network locally and then have the courage or gumption to go, fly out to PAX West and go to GDC and things like that, I don't think I would not be where I am right now, because I had a lot of opportunities because of who I met in person and who I connected with online as well. So there's also like online communities on Facebook. There's a game writers Facebook group, which is very active. It's just called Game Writers. And they're really good. Twitter, for some reason, like all the game industry is on Twitter. Like I don't know why they picked Twitter as their jam, but they're all on there chatting with each other, and there's some new catastrophe every week in the game industry. It seems like like people please stop doing weird things.
Discords lately as well. There's a Unity Discord. Each of those that I mentioned, the Unity developers, Unreal developers, IGDA, they each have a Discord now, and people do a lot of like meetups and chats and spawn game jams out of them. And it's a great opportunity there too.
Yes, I'm terrible at Discord. I'm on like 17 Discords, and I check it like once every 2 months. I think I'm so bad at
I think I'm in like 60 now.
Yeah.
But each one of these new studios that I meet, every game now has, the game's got its own Discord.
Yep.
So the studio's got a Discord, and then the game's got a Discord. So I joined them all. But, it really burns my gears or grinds my gears. Discord has this new thing where for the first 2 weeks that you join a new Discord, you get a little
sprout,
like a sprout icon next to your name, so the people know you're new and can. But I don't want to be seen as new. I want to be able to dip in and out of these, so I don't have 60 in my list. So now I just join them all. And now I've got them like organized into folders so that I can sit there and be in 60 and not be a sprout, because I've been around. I'm just I just come in and out.
Yeah,
Jeff is no sprout.
I'm not a sprout.
There's so many different social media outlets right now. Like it's just like Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, not Pinterest, but like Instagram, Facebook.
I would love them to
like
consolidate back down a little bit, because
that'd be great.
It's hard to.
I definitely feel like we've all scattered. Like we're everywhere, but we're not somewhere all together in one space. Like it's interesting.
As you said, it's a separate opportunity. The in-person meetups, if those can come back again, there's just an exponentially larger degree of bandwidth when you're talking to someone in person or a group of people in person. You can get a lot done online, and it is great, but the bandwidth of communication when you're physically talking to someone in person is much, much greater. And if PAX West 3 weeks ago is any indication, they're coming back.
Oh, that's
PAX West was enormous.
Yeah.
All of the big developers were coming back. It was packed. Vibrant. Groups, social events around the outside and on the outskirts. So I was really heartened by seeing that, and hopeful that that's a trend that will continue, and we will get more of those kinds of things coming back in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm hoping that with the pandemic trending for, better. I don't know if that's really happening, but that is my I hope.
Not
Inshallah.
the end, but hopefully the beginning of the end, and
Yeah.
we can hope
That would
for
be
that trend to
wonderful.
continue.
I miss hugging people. I want to like be and I just miss going to like PAX and wandering around and seeing all the indie games and just seeing so many like booths of video games. And I like going to PAX as a game designer because being around the players is in that way and like being immersed in their passion and their excitement and seeing them standing in line, being in cosplay, like really playing the games and getting into it, or just sitting on the side and talking to each other about being games. It like fuels me so much. Like, yes, this is why I'm doing this. This is my motivation. Like those smiles on those faces, those people who are excited to show up as their favorite character, like that is what's driving me. That is who I want to be reaching with my content.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah,
And
it is.
I agree, and I've heard that from other studios and people that go
Mm.
to these conferences. It's seeing the people
Yeah.
playing the games. All right, well this has been amazing.
Thank you
Really
so
appreciate
much.
it. A whole another new dimension of game creator that we were really glad that we got a chance to talk to. Just more of the in depth of the writing. You know, gets into game design also, which we've heard about, but I really like the writer creator part of it, and you've sort of enlightened us there. So we really appreciate it. And we shall definitely stay connected. I got to get my band back together and get back into LOTRO. I'm sure we're going to do that before long. And I'll drop you a note when we do that. You can watch. We'll stream it or something, or record it, and I'll show you my band.
Thank you so much for coming, Shae. It's been fantastic talking to you.
Thank you
Yes,
so much
thank
for
you very
having
much.
me. It's wonderful. Thank you.
All right, we will talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been a New Overlords production. For more, please visit newoverlords.com for video, subscribe and feed links, and other ways to help the show.